think we're good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to my podcast, Roll Around, Find Out. We've got Timothy Fogarty, not of CCR lineage.
That's not true.
What?
No. Don't get too excited. Technically, all of the Fogartys are related in one way or another. Our roots can be traced back all the way to Ireland. So no matter the spelling, we're all technically related, but I couldn't tell you how close, whether I'm a second or third or 100th cousin of John Fogarty.
Well, that guitar back there, I thought that almost sealed the deal.
Well, the funny thing is, it's an ongoing tradition in my family. My dad used to lie when he was in high school that he was John Fogarty's cousin, and he was a musician, and I imagine he used it to get laid and whatever.
Yeah.
And then that tradition carried on. I became a musician myself for 20 years, playing in punk bands and stuff like that, you know.
Oh, that's another passion of mine. We could talk
Go all
punk
day.
bands.
Well, the funny thing about, sorry to be dismissive, but nerds, is we generally share in like the same handful of hobbies. It's like, and they're all sort of impulsive, right? It's like we play games, we, do bands because we weren't cool and we didn't have that killer instinct with the ladies. What other nerdy things can you possibly conjure up? But pro wrestling, like we all like the same stuff. Oh, I should ask about language. I am prone to the 4-letter word every now and then.
My goal is family friendly, but
I will keep it clean if I can.
No problem. I cut from the same cloth, I guess. Wrestling,
right?
Stone Cold, that was my era. Loved him, but then I drifted away, and now I'm just casually watching it. Mm-hmm. But a couple weekends ago, I was invited to an amateur local middle school wrestling event. Christ. And I guess some guys have been in WWE at various times or whatever, but it was about as amateur as you can get. And it was still one of the coolest things I've done in the last 10 years. These nobodies come out from this, velvety cloth. Their music hits, and then everybody. One guy, his name was Bankroll, and this was his move. You get the hand out.
All right.
Okay, and then you go like this, and then the crowd chop, and then by the end, chop them up.
Right. Yeah, but we all seem to. It's funny when you look at like the TTRPG scene, like right now, like everyone you see in who is involved in it or creates in it is a 30 to 40-year-old, normally white dude. So yeah, there's definitely a stereotype, for better or worse.
Sure. Well,
yeah, I completely interrupted your introduction.
Quite all right. No. Well, we won't bury the lead. Sure. So you are the only designer of Plight?
As far as I know.
All right.
I did work on it by myself.
Okay. And you have the floor. Tell me your pitch for Plight.
Plight is a traditional fantasy solo-friendly tabletop RPG set in a vague but war-bound kingdom. Essentially, what I mean by that, traditional fantasy, it's Tolkien-esque. So it has all your traditional elves and dwarves and dragons and wizards and all that stuff. And what I mean by warbound is there's a particular mechanic in it that I leveraged from Merc Borg. where I don't know if you're familiar with Merkborg. There is a section of the book called the Calendar of Necrobel. And the calendar is a series of prophecies that the GM or the warden, I forget the nomenclature, but they roll a particular die once a day. And if they roll a 1, then they activate, or one of those prophecies comes true. So it could be like all of a sudden it's raining frogs. And what it does is it changes the complete dynamic of the background of the world that you're in. And it was such a neat mechanic that, and since I was doing a traditional fantasy kind of game, it's like, why would anyone bother to get this? There has to be some slight tweak. Well, it's like, well, what if I utilize this, but instead of the world coming to an end, there's essentially a war between the 3 primary species of elves, dwarves, and humans, and things get closer and closer to an ultimate epic conflict. Now, that's just the background. You don't have to participate in it, but it does change the dynamic where if you have a party of 2 or 3 people and they're a couple of different species, like you have an elf and a couple of dwarves, and you roll into an elven village and there's a conflict going on, or like dwarves are not so, or elves are not so happy with dwarves, they might tell the dwarves in your party, hey, those 2 got to beat it. And then how are you going to react to that? So it just changes the dynamic of it. And that was my little spin on the entire sort of traditional game.
I don't think it's in the forward, but you do a good mention of describing all of that, how races are an integral part of it. Let's go to, I think before that here, the inspirations that you have. When I first reached out and emailed, I mean, Cairn, Into the Odd, Knave, these are like gold to me right now. So as soon as I saw that, and that it's a roll under system, I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I listened to some episodes of your show, and I've heard you lament on your love for roll under systems, or perhaps it's your hatred of roll over systems.
Depends on the day.
Yeah, so the game was created. Well, I should say this. I made a decision that, like, I want to create a game too. And I came up with this big epic concept for a game, and I started plugging away at it. And unfortunately, like, it took me 3 years of just writing and writing and writing. And I must have wrote 150 pages 7 different times, because I was learning as I went. Like, when I first started, I had no idea how to create a character sheet. I didn't know what software people use. I had no idea. I think I started on Mac Pages, and then maybe a year or 2 later, eventually invested in the Affinity Design Suite. So it was a big, long process of learning, but eventually I had a meltdown, and I had to come to terms with the fact that, like, my ambition far outweighed my skill, which is, that was my fault for trying to do something so grand, because it was looking like the book was going to be 300 pages and I couldn't get past this one mark. So I, like I said, had a meltdown, and I went, well, maybe I'm not going to release nothing. I have to do something. Like, my friends had known, like, I'd been working on this thing forever. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just do what seemingly a lot of other people do, which is, and all the advice you hear from RPG designs, they say, start small, and acquire the skill. So I went back to the drawing board and thought, I'll just create like a system that is a hack of several other systems. And the great thing is that there are games out there and designers who have their text under Creative Commons license, so it's free for you to use to create your own game. And Cairn, I think, was the most generous by Yochai Gall. So I think I started with that. And of course, Cairn itself is a hack of Knave and Into the Odd. And they're, of course, hacks of original BX D&D, and that's a hack of Chainmail, and so on and so forth. So I just started there and just started trying to rewrite wherever I could and make little tweaks to the rules that I thought would benefit and elaborate. Because one of the problems with the original Cairn, I know he's working on a second edition, but there's so much that's not very well explained, unfortunately. So I just tried to take his 20 pages and make an 80-page a functional game but had more to it. It's still rules light, but there's also a bestiary, an oracle system for us solo people, and many more elaborate examples, things like that. And I like the way it turned out. But yeah, I only released it less than a week ago, and I released the PDF for free for a multitude of reasons. But ultimately, it's a gift to the scene. You know, whoever wants a free OSR title is free to have it. And I'm waiting, I believe on Monday, I'm going to get the proof for a hardback book from Lulu that anyone can get. It's being sold at cost. I think it's going to come in at like $20. But as soon as I get the proof on Monday and give it the okay, it'll be available for people to purchase, although I don't make a dime on it.
It is an interesting thing. It's just the love of the hobby. And I don't know if you're a big YouTuber. I follow a lot of creators on YouTube, and
I do.
think
I actually made a decision to not wear my Me, Myself, and Die t-shirt. And instead went with the Mega Man 2 bosses.
Yeah. A classy look.
Yeah.
And I think it was I might be getting his name wrong. Big in the space, Professor Dungeon Craft. Is that?
Well, there's Professor Dungeon Master who.
Okay, must be him.
Yes.
He came out with a video and said, if you make something, charge it. You know.
Oh, right.
Charge money for it. And
I'm a believer in that, by the way.
Oh.
But here's the thing, like, I'm not interested in making a living or even attempting to in this field. I'm only doing this as a hobby. And like I said, that Plight is a legitimate gift. Like, it was made because there's a vacuum for this particular kind of game in the hobby. There's not that many solo focused tabletop RPGs that are set in a traditional fantasy setting. You know, there's some, like Ironsworn is set in a low fantasy setting where, you know, the magic is all situational. Like, I want to talk to that dead guy. Okay, well, you got to sprinkle some chicken bones and light a few candles and fart eastward. And it's like, no, I just want to throw a fireball around. Why do I got to do all this stuff? You know, so I wanted to put something out there that was just sort of, you know, all the Tolkien stuff that everyone seems to enjoy, you know, the roots of D&D, where it's the wizard with the pointy hat who has the staff and the big book, and the, you know, the paladins and the fighters and all that stuff. That was sort of lacking. So the book was made not only for me to play, but anyone who was missing that sort of thing. And also, because it's a complete package, you could technically play that game, but you would have to Frankenstein together a series of supplements. You would need your core rules, you'd need your either your GM emulator or your Oracle, and then you need a series of books with various tables in them. And before you know it, you got an entire library in your play area, and it's like, I can't get anything done around here because I'm constantly sifting through pages. Well, this is an 80-page book that basically takes the place of all those things. They're making it easy for us, the solo players. So it's a gift.
Well, I will be purchasing the hardback, but the PDF, which I've printed out, thank you for the gift.
My pleasure. And, you know, the funny thing is, it's a gift. And because I did that one game that didn't come out, that I essentially put an axe to after 3 years. And this game, I used SRDs to, you know, come up with a lot of the concepts and mixing them together. And then the artwork in the book, which I think looks very professional, is done by Daniel Commerci, who's an Italian artist. It's all stock art and everything, including the cover, that you could technically, if you wanted to, if you were like, oh, I want to make an adventure for this series, you can make it look exactly like the book. And guess what? I ain't going to sue you because I don't care. It's meant for people to have fun with and do whatever they want with it. But you could make adventure modules or expansions or whatever it is people do fairly cheap, because I believe all the pieces in the book probably cost me like $4 or $5 a piece.
Oh, wow.
Not counting like me having to buy Affinity Design and and print up 1,000 different copies at Office Depot. But yeah, it didn't cost me too much. So I hope people enjoy it.
I've just briefly dabbled in design myself, and I started Google Docs. And now this computer we're on is my work computer, and I realized, oh, Microsoft Publisher is on here. And I don't necessarily think that's a top tier program, but it's a step up, I think, from the Google services. And so we'll see if I follow in your footsteps and I upgrade to something nicer.
Well, I would say that most programs out there are most often they're word processors more than anything. You know, Mac Pages is a word processor, and I could manipulate it to make very professional looking things. But at a certain point I hit, you know, it comes a point where it's like, I need to manipulate these layers, and that is not a function in Mac Pages. So that's when you bite the bullet and go, I've got $174 to spare, or whatever the Affinity suite cost, you know. And then it was about taking time to learn it. But I think the end result came out really like professional looking. It looks like I fooled people into thinking I'm a professional, like a tabletop RPG designer, and I'm not.
Just these simple tables in these tattered pieces of paper. I mean, it doesn't have to be like that, but it's a nice touch. And again, the art, like you said, just it flows. The whole system, the whole layout, it flows.
Right. And I think it's like, I kind of made the game that I wanted to play, and I thought a lot of people would want, like Rules Light. I don't know. I mean, I know you've dabbled a little bit in solo tabletop role-playing games because I've listened to the show a bit, and I believe I heard your report of your very first one. I forget which one it was.
I think NoteQuest.
NoteQuest, right? Yeah, by what's his name? Tiago Junges, something like that.
That's better than I would have done.
I think he's like Brazilian Portuguese, something like that. But you know, I needed a game that was rules light, not too many rules. One of the biggest problems with playing solo tabletop RPGs is the more you have to pick up the book and flip through and find the answer to your question, the more you're liable to quit for the evening, or, you know, because it slows down. That's why like big crunchy games are terrible, because if you're the kind of person who likes, you know, playing to every rule, you know, you fall in a river and you go, wait, there's a rule for this for swimming. And you got to flip through and you're like, wait, it was on 140. Hold on. You know, before you know it, 5 minutes have gone by and it's like, I'd rather play Cyberpunk, the video game, not the TTRPG. But yeah, I wanted to make that game where it's like, all right, it has everything I need in one little 80-page book. I can quickly get to it. It's easily labeled and you don't need anything else. And it worked out really good, I think.
I'd say it's a home run. And you also mentioned the other things that come with it. Your character sheets fitting spot on. I love your location maps and the hexes. Like everything you need. Literally, you said it.
Yeah, that was something else that was important to me, because like when you're a game designer, I don't know if other designers think of things like these, but I think of like, what does the table look like first? Like, what does the play area look like? Do I have sheets of paper spread out all over the place, or do I have just a notebook? And I figured, like, well, character sheet's important, obviously. But I'm someone who likes a little bit more of a tangible experience when it comes to delving into locations. I don't know if you've ever played D100 Dungeon or 4 Against Darkness.
I have 4 Against Darkness right here. I've cracked it open, but haven't played it yet.
Well, not to spoil it, it's a very simplified, almost childish version of a role-playing game. There's zero story. It's just about going into a dungeon, finding the boss, killing it, and taking as much loot as you can. It's a great way to get into solo tabletop role-playing games as a hobby, but soon enough, you'll be like, okay, I get it. I've done enough of these. And not to mention, it's another one of those scenarios where, excuse me, they sell their little expansions 8 pages at a time, you know, on Amazon. And I believe the designer's name is Andrea Sfilagoy. And, but, you know, there's like this barrage of like 30 books and that add a little rule here and there. It's like, I don't need a stack of books like this on my table. I need one that does everything I want. And it takes, not to put myself over, but it takes a person like me who has no interest in making money whatsoever to go, yeah, I'll do that. I forget why I even brought 4 Against. Oh, why I included, like, I wanted a tangible experience like those games where you can physically draw out dungeons, because I think the more you can visualize those things, as well as a hex map, the more you're immersed. So I needed to have a little location sheets, the hex maps. The hex map also doubles as a battlefield. If you ever want to, like, go, oh, you can just draw quickly with a pencil. Here's a ridge here. And, you know, and then put your little miniatures or whatever you got, put it on there and duke it out. And then what's the 4th sheet? Oh, I made an NPC sheet as well.
Oh, yeah.
Just for keeping track of any NPCs that you like or don't like or what have you. There was another sheet I was working on that I abandoned, and I regretted a little bit. In Plight, the GM is referred to as the Arbiter, and I was going to make an Arbiter sheet that kept track of all the Casus Belli that get activated, which are the, you know, reasons for war. But I abandoned it because I got lazy. What can you do?
You tripped at the finish line.
Dude, it's such hard work. People don't realize, like I said, like 3 years and having a bunch of, you know, basically for 3 years, I had to stop playing games. You really have to, like, dedicate yourself to, if you're going to make something, you have to really put everything you got into making it. And in order to do that, you have to stop playing games. I think I actually heard Sean Tompkin of Ironsworn say, like, I wish I had time to play games, because I'm sure all he does is work on whatever the latest Ironsworn expansion is.
Sure.
So that's the great thing about being done, is that I now get to play a backlog of games. Like, I have every Forbidden Lands, every bit of Forbidden Lands material you can have. And I haven't touched it. Including, like, I bought like 2 sets of dice, you know, that you need with it, the Book of Beasts, all the campaign things. I haven't even, I mean, I've read them, but I haven't played it. I got Dragonbane recently. I'm looking forward to playing that because it's solo friendly. What else am I sitting on? Oh, I started Starforged last night, which was fun, creating your little part of the galaxy. That's fun.
I told myself years ago, D&D is all I need. All these other things, you know, why? And then, right. As you said, my possible loathing of D20, just, you know, I'll explore here, I'll explore there, and now it's a sickness.
Have you played Baldur's Gate 3?
I have 2 little children, and so my free time is next to nothing. I have watched people play it on Twitch, and amazing. We'll just say amazing. It is D&D as a video game, and that blows my mind.
So I learned how to play tabletop RPGs with Advanced Second Edition back when I was in junior high. In short, my best friend, his brother went to prison. And when he came back from prison, we were like, what'd you do in there? And he's like, we played Dungeons and Dragons all the time. And we were like, what? Because we thought he'd say like avoid sodomy or it's like, it was funny to think like all these hardened criminals are sitting around going, I cast magic missile. So we were like, can you teach us? And he's like, sure. So, we played D&D throughout 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. And then the female breast reared its ugly head, which is a rite of passage for generally all young guys who get into tabletop RPGs. You notice girls and you go, one outweighs the other. Yeah. And then at the same time, though, Magic the Gathering became big when I was in high school. And it was so much easier to just take a deck to school and have a quick game instead of a full, 3-hour session. So I went this big gap of time where I didn't play anything. And then it wasn't until like Donald Trump became president, whatever your opinions of that are, and the internet had become it was already nasty, but it had really gotten on both sides of the political aisle, just people became really gross. And I made a decision like, I don't want to be on social media anymore. I want to limit my digital footprint and I want to live more of an analog lifestyle. And so I got off of social media and in order to keep people in my life, I started hosting like a board game night. And then for the nights that they weren't around, it's like, it would be cool if I can play an RPG, but I don't want to play with my group, unfortunately, because, I'm married way above my station. I tricked my wife at the time because, she thought I was a super cool lead singer and guitarist of a rock band. And then she realized, after we were married, like, oh, he's into all this nerdy stuff. But so I didn't want to do that because, and not that she would actively be like, oh, you're sleeping on the couch, but she might find me less attractive if she saw me and my friends going, I'm, the magic missile comment again. So that's how I got into solo RPGs. I just wanted something I can do that's quiet, that keeps me, that something to do at the end of the night, like between 11 and 12 before I go to bed, that I can be creative, have like a fun adventure and keep a fun record of it. That wasn't a digital thing because I still do play like video games and stuff.
The main purpose for this podcast is to explore solo RPGs. And just like you said, it's such a great creative outlet. I don't necessarily think, I'm the Bob Ross or Tolkien, whatever of anything, but whatever little way, if I got downtime, I'd rather be more proactive in doing something like this than just sitting in front of the TV and watching some below average show.
To be fair, there's above average shows at the same time. We're at like the worst possible time in television history and the best possible time simultaneously. You can either watch America's Got Talent or Breaking Bad.
That's true.
You are right. Like tabletop RPGs are a creative person's hobby. You have to be creative if you're the game master because you have to prepare little things. And then you have to be quick on the fly to, create in real time. The players also have to use their critical thinking caps to be creative in the moment. And then solo TTRPGs, I mean, you really got to be a Da Vinci, doing every kind of art you can imagine because you're playing both a player and a game master. And it's kind of funny how it works because like you'll create a character and you're like, yeah, I'm this character. But you're also creating all the NPCs and you kind of, feel for them just as much. So it's almost like I was looking at some of my board games behind me here and I thought like, Hey, Betrayal at the House on the Hill. That's a pretty popular one. Everyone knows. You could play it solo. I don't know if you've ever played it. Basically, it's a game where it's a dungeon crawl. You go through a mansion, room to room. Every player takes a turn discovering a new room. At a certain point in the game, it's revealed that one of the people is a bad guy. And then the game changes. It turns into something else. It turns into everyone against this one person. So it's not too different from solo tabletop RPGs, but the difference would be that you would be playing as the hero, the protagonists, and the antagonist. Mm. So it's more of a creative writing exercise where it's like, how would this person act in this scenario? You have to go with your instinct. And that's really what solo tabletop RPGs are kind of really all about.
Apologize if you already mentioned it. Do you have a system before Plight that was like your go-to for solo role playing?
Not. I mean, I have just a ton of different games, and I try to keep things as simple as I can, as little books on the table as I can. So, like Ironsworn and Starforged, they're pretty cut and dry systems. And even then, there's elements of them that I wish I could cut out. Like I don't like the fact that there's physical cards that you have on the table that work as modules that help define your character. Because putting it away, you might lose them or bend them or whatever. But I think the core concept, and we talked about this briefly before we went on the air, Ironsworn, you mentioned like it might be a little too front heavy. The truth is, despite the fact that it's a 300-page book, it probably could be explained in like 5 pages. Because really the only thing you need to know is what's the resolution mechanic for everything, and that is roll 2 d10s. Those are the challenge dice. Roll a d6. That's your, whatever it's called, the hero dice or whatever, or action die. And then add your stat to that. And if you beat one, you succeed with a complication. If you beat both, it's a strong hit and you did it, without question. Or if you blow it with both, then you miss. I mean, it's pretty easy. You can use just that, as well as a base oracle, which Ironsworn also provides, basically a closed question oracle and an open question oracle. You can use those 2 things, which technically fill up about 5 pages on any game. So I don't particularly have a specific one. I got Dragonbane while I was working on Plight, and it has a little bit of a different twist to it. So I'm interested in trying that out and seeing how it flows. I believe it's closed question oracle might be a little closer to mine because I think it might be 2d6 like mine is, which brings a bell curve. Yep. In other words, you're going to roll 7 more times than everything else. So, I'm looking forward to trying it out. But I don't have one like universal system that I use just for everything. I like to, when a designer makes something that's complete, I will try to experience it as they do it. And then I'll start trimming the fat and cutting parts out of it that I don't care, or adding things to it that possibly I might need.
Sure.
How about you? This isn't just about me, by the way.
Well, I've got 3 episodes on using ChatGPT as my DM, and that's probably 4 or 5 hours worth of stuff. And that's wild. That's just wild to me.
So I didn't listen to those particular episodes, but I am dead intrigued to know how it worked out, because I believe I downloaded when the fervor started happening about ChatGPT and AI and stuff. I was interested in it. I thought like, oh, I wonder if I can get this thing to be my dungeon master. And I don't know how you go about it. I think it was like, hey, it's so dumb. You're talking to a bunch of 1s and 0s, essentially. Hey, 1s and 0s, can you be the dungeon master of my of my cave, and it's like, yeah, sure, no sweat, kid. You're in a forest, and I go, oh, I don't know what to do. So I'm wondering how it worked out for you.
Well, the end is interesting. I started just by saying, hey, even though it's ones and zeros, I tried talking to it like a person.
I did that too.
So
I was being real personal. I was like, hey, bro.
A couple times I had to realize, like, I don't have to say please and thank you.
That's right. I do that too, just by like my nature, and I use perfect dictation, and like all my punctuation is perfect. That's the writer in me going, the commas before conjunctions and things like that. I didn't need to do any of that stuff. He understood.
Yeah. So I think the initial prompt was, hey, I want to play a role-playing game. Can you be my game master? Yeah, sure. Okay. Create me a world and a starting town. And the speed of it is phenomenal. Yeah. So I've since forgotten all the details about it, but it was like, okay, well, yeah, here's Harbor Shore, and Harbor Shore has the inn, the Captain's Tavern. City Hall has these features. There's shops available in the town markets. What would you like to do? Oh, I'm going to go to Captain's Tavern and check it out. All right, you go to the Captain's Tavern. There's barkeep Julian and 5 other patrons at a table, and just, all right, let's just keep going. It flowed so nice.
Is that right?
I got, by the 3rd session, I started to really notice it was all in the same thread. It was 3 different nights that I did it, but towards the end, it was starting to go in loops. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for something, and it said, okay, well, go to the tavern and talk to this person. I'd go to the tavern, and nobody had any information that I need. So they would say, go to the docks. Okay. So I go to the docks. I'm asking around. Nobody has any information. Try going back to the tavern. I was already there. So that was a problem. And then from what I remember of the story, I was a rat catcher, and I got just a small job catching rats in the bottom of the bar. And
by the way, the worst possible job you can get. I should tell you, my day job is exterminator. Being a rat catcher sucks.
Well, I would hope, like a plumber, like it's a crummy job, but the pay's decent.
Oh, the pay's pretty good, and the schedule you can't beat. But you don't want to get the plague.
Is that a real thing?
No. I mean, when the pandemic shut everything down, we stayed in business, and of course, we were essential, because if all the exterminators in the world or pest control technicians just stop, you will get the plague, because rats will run rampant, and buddy, that's how it works.
Dang.
So yeah, rat catching, there's a lot of feces and urine, and it's gross. I hate it. But the funny thing about this AI is it's great, because it has a concept of like, oh, I know what an RPG is, and it probably just assumed fantasy, and it just said, yeah, there's the tavern and there's a cave down yonder. The only problem is yes, it doesn't have the foresight to not realize when you've been stuck in a loop, and that's when you have to set it, take it to the side and go, hey, look, chat GPT, you're broken on this one thing, fix it. And then he goes, yes, all right, now back to the action. But the funny thing is, it's not too much different than that. Did you ever play Skyrim if you have an Amazon device?
No.
All right. So there was a joke a while ago that, anytime there was a new system or whatever that came out, it's like, well, of course we're going to have Skyrim for it. And I believe there was even like a mock commercial where it was like in someone's refrigerator, and the guy was like, go in the cave, talking to his refrigerator, the computer in his refrigerator. But it turns out, if you have an Amazon Echo, you can play kind of like that. You could play a game of Skyrim where it's like you're on a path. There's a trail heading east, and there's, and then there's the path behind you that goes to Winterhelm or whatever the name of the opening area was. It's like, and you go, keep going east, and it's like there's a skeletons, and you go attack or whatever. It's actually kind of interesting. It's not too different from what you were explaining, and I mean what we technically do. Yeah, just if you have an Amazon Echo, I should stop saying I call her Mrs. A around the house because I don't want her to get excited. But if you have a Mrs. A, say, Mrs. A, I want to play Skyrim, she'll start talking to you about dragons and stuff.
I have Google devices. I wonder if
maybe. Yeah, Bethesda's trying to get that damn thing everywhere.
Yeah. That's great. I imagine, like any solo RPG, since you're the player and the GM, it's you set the path. And so how the Chat GPT ended, I was getting frustrated. It was getting in loops. It was misremembering things. Right. So I said, okay, well, I activate my Super Saiyan powers and I blow up this portion of the world. Sure. Why not?
Yeah, with it's got to be the most forgiving dungeon master anyone has ever had, where it's like, I want to do this. Yeah, sure. But the truth is a good dungeon master should listen to everything a player wants to do, and if it seems reasonable, they should be able to do it. If it's reasonable. Now, of course, saying hey, Chat GPT, guess what? I didn't tell you. I'm a part werewolf and I Hulk out and grow hair and I, whatever. It's just going to say, okay, whatever you say, you big idiot. But a good dungeon master, I think, for storytelling will let most things happen.
Yeah, there's that classic, what is it? No, but, yes, and.
Yeah.
I ended up, the story ended by me blowing up half the world, and then, like Thanos, I just became a farmer and lived the rest of my days being a lowly farmer.
It sounds like you and Chat GPT gave up, just like, oh, whatever, let's get this over with.
That is true. I got frustrated, and I was feeding it those prompts, but again, like to go back and forth. And then I said, okay, well, I've gone everywhere. And they said, okay, go travel up this mountain and go find this guy. And I got up there and he did not have the information I was told he would have. Mm-hmm. And then I said, okay, well, you know what? I've tested it to the limits that I want to go with this. Right. Now let's just have fun and blow up the world.
So yeah, Chat GPT has the concept, but it doesn't have the nuance or the finesse. I mean, that is one of the problems that any AI is going to have. It's going to do things generically, and it's not going to have the critical thinking of a human being who can understand pacing. Like if, do you have a game group? Do you play with a multiplayer table of RPGs?
Me personally?
Yeah.
It's me and two other people. We play virtual.
Oh, well, perfect. But so let's say, Friday night is your night with your pals or whatever. And, you got 3 hours, and if you're the dungeon master, you go, okay. Even if you're doing it sandbox style, where it's like, okay, you're in this particular hex and there's this cave here, but there's also a cave or a castle, 12 miles in that direction and something else in that direction. What do? You still know in the back of your head, I want to give I want to escalate the storytelling so that it climaxes at the end of our session. That's something Chat GPT is just not going to do. Right. Where a good human dungeon master will pace things out so that at the end of the 3 hours, something exciting happens. Chat GPT is just going to be like, you talk to the farmer. He doesn't know what you're talking about. Oh, all right.
I watched something on it, and while not quote unquote intelligent of all its capabilities, they said that it's designed for the average person, average user. So to that point, doesn't know, it always tries to keep you in the middle, keep the median going.
You're saying the IQ level of ChatGPT is 100.
Yes.
So if you're a genius, it's like, is this guy a idiot or? Oh, that sounds terrible. Or if you're an idiot and you're talking to ChatGPT, it's like, wow, I'm in the future.
That's great.
Yeah.
In our brief back and forth via email before this, you said you have hundreds of hours podcasting. Do you have a podcast? Do you?
I don't. So I don't right now. I have a history in art. Like I had an art class every year I was in school, and I think my senior year I had like 4. And then so any medium of art you can imagine I've probably dabbled in, from music, writing poetry, short stories, or even more long form things like novellas. I got into podcasting fairly early before people really knew what podcasting was. So I think the most recent thing I did, I was the host of a show. It's still up there if anyone cares, but it's called Turnbuckle Boogie, a show about the history of pro wrestling that I co-hosted with a pro wrestler for a few years. But anyway, we brought it to an end and put a bow on it, and it gave me the time to focus on doing this project. And now I'm flirting with the idea of maybe doing something similar to what you're doing, but only 4 times a year, doing a Questmaker quarterly, where I talk to somebody of interest in the hobby. I was planning on doing a YouTube channel, in full disclosure, to sort of help promote any sort of things that I create, which I have plans for, but we'll see. I'm so exhausted after doing all this stuff for the past couple of years that I might need a slight break. But yeah, I've done podcasting for over a decade, I think. And so I've probably logged over 1,000 hours on various subjects, from music to pro wrestling and pop culture in general. That's why I have all the equipment here. I mean, I had a recording studio for, doing music and stuff. And it's like, oh, I guess, and you get to a certain age, especially if you're like a punk rock kid, you can see I got some gray in my beard. You get to a certain age and you get fat and kids look at you differently and you go, all right, maybe I should start talking, since you can do that at any age and people don't frown on it. So that's how I got into doing podcasting, but nothing currently. We'll see in the future.
That's great.
Yeah. Let me know if you need any tips or on sound engineering or things of that nature.
I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're pretty simple here. I had a Rode mic, and I think that's how you pronounce it.
Rode. How does it spelled? Is it RHODE?
Yeah. Yep.
Also, they manufactured. Actually, I may be wrong on that. I was thinking of Rhodes keyboards. Never mind. I'm sure it functions. I'm sure it's fine. That
and Audacity. That's
how I started too. Audacity is free software that you can use. And, I'll say this about solo. I'll try to link it back to solo tabletop RPGs. I had a hard time getting into the hobby because, you can read a book and go, oh, I get it. And then you sit down and try to play and you go, I don't get it. And then you get on YouTube and go, let's see if I can find some instructions. And what you find are, quote unquote, actual plays. But what you find out the hard way is these people who are doing actual plays of solo tabletop RPGs, they're not really doing actual plays, because they're not showing you how to play the game without a camera or a microphone, like how we would do it, right? I don't want to broadcast myself. I just want a quiet thing to do. I'm not doing this for the entertainment of others. I'm doing it for the entertainment of myself. And there's not a whole lot of stuff out there like that. You just have to kind of figure it out. But a way you can do it, if you don't want to keep a journal, I buy these things. Moleskine makes these little, and they're graph paper. and they're tearaway. So if you don't like what you do, you just pull the sheet out, and there's a little pocket in the back too. And they sell them 3 at a time. And I have a whole stack of them. But if you don't want to just keep like little notes and stuff, which is how I play with like bullet points, I don't write long sentences or anything. You could record yourself talking, even if you don't want to broadcast it, because let's face it, it's not always entertaining to other people, especially if you bore. and look, everyone's creative at different, there's a spectrum of talent, you know what I mean? But you could record, if you have a simple recording interface, you could use Audacity to record yourself. Although I would say you should create a Word document that says, don't listen to this if you find my dead body, because people are going to play it at your funeral and you're going to look like a goddamn idiot. Like, this guy sat in his room downstairs by himself, just talking to himself like Lord Helmet from Spaceballs. It's crazy.
That's so funny. Just coworkers, I was telling them I was really excited about this, and they were just casually aware of the podcast. They're like, yeah, what's an average episode? Like an hour and a half? Like, You talk to yourself for an hour and a half?
I don't recommend it. It's a skill to be able to, I mean, obviously I've done a lot of talking into microphones and singing, but it's a skill that you can improve, you know, like any skill. Some people are born with it and they're talented. That must be nice. But for the rest of us, you know, it's a skill to be able to talk and keep it flowing where you're not doing a lot of so yeah, especially podcasts on your own is difficult too. It's like an hour and a half and it's just me. I hope you find this entertaining. I think you do a good job.
I appreciate that.
Of course.
To the first point you had said, not knowing what to do, and you sit down and you read it. I do have 2 questions,
please,
on Plight and how hit protection works.
Sure. I mean, the same apply. Any questions you have about this game will apply to Cairn too. So, because a lot of the verbiage was utilized from the Cairn system reference data sheet. I did try to reword things to try to make them a little bit more understandable. But go ahead and ask the question, and I will explain.
You had mentioned 2nd edition. I'm backing it.
Oh, good for you. What do you think about it? Because I saw the preview of it, and my initial thought was, and I don't mean to disparage Yokai Gall, but part of the appeal for me of that 1st edition is, oh wow, an entire system in 20 pages, perfect. Now there's, I want to say 60 pages of backgrounds, and it's like, what are you doing? That's too much.
I agree. Cairn,
they don't even have the rules until like page 70.
It was so successful, you know, I'm sure people were pushing them, add this, add that.
Right.
But you're right. It was so sleek and clean, and now it's getting bloated, we'll say.
A little bit. And like I said, I'm not trying to disparage him. You know, he's a creative guy. And also, look, he was generous in that he made his game Creative Commons, and that I could utilize the text to make it the base of my game, even though I've tweaked a lot of the little rules and such. But yeah, 60 pages up front before the rules of backgrounds is a little convoluted in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I'm a basement dwelling mouth breather. So, you know, for anybody to come up with this, it's amazing. So, but I've never run it, and it's been a while since I've looked at it. So, the 2 friends I play with were only D&D. They don't really explore anything else. So just getting to it, I understand. You roll a D6, you have that stat, and then let me read it exactly. This reflects your character's ability to avoid damage in combat. HP does not indicate a character's health or fortitude, nor do they lose it for very long. If an attack takes a character's HP exactly to 0, the character receives a mark.
Correct.
So that's like reading the marks. Is that like leveling up?
A little bit, right? So in this part is almost exactly like Cairn, in that, you know, you roll a 1d6 for your hit protection. It's not hit points, it's hit protection. Technically, your hit points is your strength, ultimately. But you could, the last character I made for Plight had 1 hit protection, which forces you to go, okay, this character is not fighting anyone. And then you have to sort of think outside the box and go, how can I solve all my problems without swinging a sword around? Because my guy's going to die in a hit or two. The marks, technically, there's no strict leveling up. There's no experience points. There's no arbitrary thing like that. Marks is a version of Yohai Cairn's scars that essentially, it's almost like a get lucky sort of thing. It simulates what it's like to be a veteran of combat. Let's say you entered a dangerous combat engagement and you got lucky and came out of it okay. You're going to increase in some fashion from your knowledge of that engagement. You don't get too much. So basically, it ratchets up depending on how much damage you took that brought you exactly to 0. So say you had, you got hit with 5 damage and you only had 4 hit protection left and you have 1 armor, it's going to take you exactly to 0. So you would look at number 4 on the marks chart to see what you got. And it can give you a slight boost. You know, I believe 4 might be roll 2d6 and that's your new hit protection maybe. Mm-hmm. It still doesn't make you unstoppable. And the amount of times that is going to happen to you is so rare, because I mean, if you got some jerk at the table who's like, well, I'm going to throw myself into danger at every given moment to try to get my hit protection down to 0 exactly, that guy's going to die over and over and over. It's the lucky few that are going to be able to attain a mark.
That's great. And then beyond that, let's say it's a lengthy combat and your hit protection is below 0. Now you're digging into your stats.
Right.
Any further damage you take after that, is that considered a critical hit?
Oh, good question. Yeah. Well, yes, technically, yes. Until your hit protection is revived from a short rest, which you can do mid-combat. Even if you're playing solo, the reason that the character sheets are a half sheet is so that you can have multiple characters. So you can run an entire party. There's not a whole lot to each sheet. And if it's some sort of scenario like you come into a room and there's 2 goblins, but there's 4 of you, all right, well, 2 go at a time. And at a certain point, if one person thinks like, I can't take this anymore, I got to step out and do a short rest. You are left exposed. And if that goblin gets wind of it, then maybe he'll turn his sights on you since you're trying to take a short rest for that particular round of combat, or turn of combat. Or you might get lucky and you get your hit protection back. You know, I believe it's a 1d4 plus 1 maybe for a short rest.
Yep.
So, and then you can jump right back into it. That's a way that you can go about it.
In reading it, I thought, yeah, this is a pretty brutal system, which your one of the last lines in your introduction I've got highlighted here. Blood is not cheap.
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah. The introduction is a almost poetic sort of explanation of the world. The world of Plight is technically not defined. It mentions in the first paragraph that the queen is dead, the high priestess has stepped in, and she has dissolved the royal council that has kept the relationship between elves, dwarves, and men sort of together. I don't explain that if the queen was human or not. I don't explain if the high priestess is human or not. All these things, including the world, are meant to be defined by the person who's playing it. You can generate everything in real time as you play it and define the world how you want. So yeah.
I personally love that. Give me enough to get the ball rolling,
Mhm.
and then I'll create my own story. I've got Ravenloft, whatever 5e adventures. I like the maps, and
Right.
you think they're professional designers, so I learn from them.
Mhm.
But I struggle running those because I have to read the whole adventure. I'm going to contradict, and then I have to change. But if I make it up myself, I know what's happening.
Exactly, right? And the more, and it's specific to solo players, the more you create the things yourself, the more you're going to be invested in them and you're going to remember them. I have a game, let's see, right here. Where is it? Okay, I'm wrong. Sorry. I have a Simba Room up in the closet, out of reach.
Gorgeous game. Gorgeous.
Gorgeous artwork, great system, everything about it. And the lore of it is second to none. The problem is everything about it is completely conceptualized, and then it's really up to you to absorb it and hopefully live in it. I find myself having a hard time trying to remember every single faction because it's already created. Remember every single city, every sort of character that exists. It's too much. The key with a good RPG, solo or otherwise, start small. In Plight in particular, once you create a character or two or three or however much you can create 50 for all I care. Create your opening hex of where you're at. Put a settlement there that explains what your character is doing there, and then create all the hexes around it. Just randomly generate them. Oh, this one has an impassable high mountain. This one, has rainforest. And start, but generate just that chunk and don't do too much, and explore outward, and that's the game. But if everything is already explored and understood for you, like in Simba Room, then really it's just about a power fantasy. How can I get all the magic spells and get all the best equipment so that I could be the most badass dude that sits at this table?
I wouldn't have thought that, but I agree 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
How do I solve this?
Right. Even like a small game like Merc Borg, it has a setting in it, Galgenbeck and the I think that's the name of the city, and all it's a really avant-garde looking map, and it's quite honestly it's hard to understand. But it's that sort of setting that I almost vaguely kind of disregard in a sense whenever I play in that world, because it's like I can't keep track of all the the Lost Valley and this graveyard and all this stuff. I'll act like I'm writing some death metal lyrics, and I'll write my own stuff. And I have ownership of it because I created it and I'm immersed in it.
Yeah. Well, that's everything I've got.
Sure.
Anything you want to promote about yourself, promote about Plight, or any other systems not your own you'd want to shout out?
Well, to give credit where credit is due, I'll shout out the games that I either leveraged mechanics from or utilized their Creative Commons license. Cairn and Knave and Into the Odd are the three core ones, and I think people should try them out, check them out. Into the Odd had a second edition that was illustrated by Johan Nohr of Merc Borg fame, and it's pretty fantastic. It's very simple. Yeah, there you go. I got mine too.
Also gorgeous.
Johan Nohr is second to literally none. He's given the RPG scene a bit of a punk rock feel, quite honestly, because his games look like rad zines that you would just find, from when I was young. But so yeah, Into the Odd has a second edition. It's a great book. I believe you can get it on Amazon if you don't feel like going through all the other areas. Cairn is having its second edition, but it's going to be a box set that has multiple books. I encourage there's a free I think it's a play test or a beta or something on maybe Drive Through RPG that you can check out. And then, of course, Knave, which I did back, and it might be the last thing I ever back. And its second edition is coming out. Maybe, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, before Christmas 2023. And it's a great solo player's toolkit. And there's elements of the second edition that are seemingly cross-compatible with Plight. So I would definitely recommend picking it up. In fact, one thing in particular, it's like Ben Milton, who created Knave, Yohai Gall, who created Cairn, and me all found the same blog that gave a series of mechanics. It's by, I believe, Necropraxis. But it's a mechanic that introduces a hazard die for traveling, whether you're traveling through a location or traveling through on a hex map. All three of these books use that system with minor tweaks. I believe Ben Milton's Knave, there's 6 watches to a day. In Plight, there's 4 watches to a day. So there's a lot of cross compatibility between these 3 projects. Merc Borg, I would recommend to every human being ever, as a fantastic package. And even if you find it complicated to use, as a coffee table book. And then I also pulled some inspiration from Forbidden Lands, which, if you're a solo player, I think is worth getting. And the amount of material out there is pretty fantastic as well. Plight is available for free at Questmaker, spelled without vowels, so QSTMKR.itch.io. And probably by the end of the week, there's going to be a hardback available, and I'll maybe make an announcement on Reddit, and then I'll just leave it up to anyone who cares to spread the word, because I don't have social media, and I don't care if 5 people are playing it or 5 million. At least I'll be playing it.
That's awesome. You're awesome.
Thanks,
I appreciate your time. I thought this was incredible.
Hey, thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. All right, we will stop recording.